Hey guys, what's up? It's Karl, and this is the Microsoft Surface Laptop 4, one of Microsoft's most popular selling laptops, obviously the fourth being their fourth gen. This is probably the closest laptop to compete with, say, the 13-inch MacBook Pro. They have similar form factors, around 13 inches. They start off in and around that $1,000 mark, and that's the same this year for the Surface 4. It really depends though which type you get. You have the AMD version, $999, and I've got the Intel version, which starts at $1,300, so that's $300 more. Yes, you get slightly more storage. You get this fancy new ice blue colorway, which is honestly one of my favorites. 8 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage, and this is based off of the Intel X graphics. So this actually has better graphics performance than the AMD version. And if your workflow is a bit more dictated by graphic intensive tasks, say like video or heavy photo editing, perhaps lean towards the Intel. You'll also get a few extra frames if you're playing the occasional game, say for example, Fortnite. Even a bit of Overwatch, which was what I was mostly testing. Don't get me wrong, this isn't exactly a gaming-based laptop. I'm just comparing the, of course, Intel to AMD with, of course, the specs that I saw online. I don't think that price justification or that $300 extra is worth it to go to the Intel base. Really only lean towards this, of course, if you are, say, an Intel fan, you need an Intel-based computer. You're simply kind of in love with the ice blue color found only on the Intel-based spec. Really eye the AMD version, and even for, say, a base spec. I think this is what Surface laptops have struggled with in the past. Base models usually don't get you too far, and you have to spend the extra $300-400 just to get to a mid-tier spec, just to get some half-decent usage out of it. But I think this year around for the Surface 4, I think the base level option is really something to consider, especially at that $999 mark, so $1,300 Canadian. Really, when you're comparing that to, say, the new 13-inch MacBook with the M1 chip. It's really hard to look past some of the key benefits of this, and that's, of course, mainly the battery life, which really nothing has come close, especially at the end of last year and going into 2021. Now the Surface 4 is probably the only thing that can compete or come remotely close. And Microsoft does fully claim on their website you get 19 hours for the AMD version, 17.5 for the Intel base. In all of my testing, the longest that I got over on this machine was around 13 and a half hours on the longest stretch. That was even with my brightness down to 50%, and for a lot of that time, the device was actually a bit idle, but still, half decent. 12 to 13 hours, I would be happy with that, especially compared to the Surface 3 from last year. That's almost 60% better battery life, so I think Microsoft has done a really good job. Not saying that it's close to the 19-20 hours on my MacBook Pro, but it's still by far the best Windows laptop that I've ever tested in this price category, in this space. Nothing remotely comes close, and even if you got the AMD version, you get that extra hour. So I think Microsoft did an awesome job with its battery, so big props to them. It comes close to the MacBook. That's huge. So for the rest of the build, you still get all of the benefits of it being a Microsoft laptop. So of course, razor thin, super premium material, completely made out of aluminum. Industrial finishing, the hinge mechanism is pretty much second to none in the Windows space, really mimics what we see over on the Apple side. And I always think that's a plus. And I think that's a feature, or I guess a selling point of all Microsoft products in general. Class-leading keyboard and trackpad, and I actually love the give over on the Surface laptop typing experience, and that's because it has this soft touch plastic backing. On the flip side, I know it's a lot harder to keep clean, and because it's a new device, yeah, it looks pretty fresh, but once you own this for, 2 to 3 years, you'll start to see a bit of wear and tear, and especially where that soft touch plastic meets the aluminum, you do get a bit of fraying over time, so just kind of keep that in mind. Speaking of which, we've got the front-facing camera. I'm going to use that word again. It's half decent. You'll get by in your video calls. The one thing that I will note though, for the display, 3:2 aspect ratio, which I actually prefer, full touch screen, it still sadly has these overly large and chunky bezels. So many Windows laptops have pretty much edge-to-edge displays, especially if you're paying $1,000 plus for a premium laptop. I'd love to see Microsoft kind of stretch those and make this a bit more modern and refreshed. But overall, I think the Surface 4 has been a big improvement, especially looking at what we got with the Surface 3. I know it's hard to compare because I do edit, say, on Final Cut on my MacBook Pro, but even trying out Premiere on this, because I've got the Intel version, it's got better graphics. It handles the rest of my day-to-day work totally fine, but I think the big winner here is that improvement of the battery life, which I thought was the biggest plus over on the M1 for the MacBook line. Hands down the best Windows laptop that I've tested longevity-wise, and hopefully, kind of knock on wood, as we return back to work, hopefully back to traveling, that battery life I think is pretty huge. Like I mentioned, I think the base AMD model is the one that I'm leaning towards and the one that I would recommend to most of you, but still, the Intel version, if you can afford that extra $300 for that slightly better GPU performance and of course the ice blue color, I think Microsoft has done an awesome job with the Surface 4. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one, and if you have any other questions around the device, happy to answer them down below in the comments. And quickly, I know a lot of people were asking over on Insta, the closest thing to the ice blue colorway is actually the blue AirPod Maxes. As a little note, catch the rest of you in one of my next ones. Peace!